Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're in Masechtas Nedarim daf Mem Tes. We are going to begin on Mem Tes Amud Aleph, the new Mishnah, the new parak. The sixth parak begins Hanoder min ha-mavushal. If a person makes a neder saying that he is not going to eat things which are cooked, or as Rashi says, mavushal kruoi, mutter b'tzali over sholok. So he's allowed to eat other foods that are roasted, as well as sholok. Rashi says mavushal yoismedai, if it's overcooked. So these things are allowed. We look in the Ran, she'ena b'chlal lashon mavushal. This doesn't fall into the category of mavushal. Sholok bashal v'loy bashal. So according to the Ran, he says that sholok means it's not entirely cooked. Skipping a few lines, sholok tohacha bashal v'lo bashal. Nedarim halacha shebnei adam. V'tavshel sheniz bashal yoismedai b'chlal mavushalhu. He actually says a tash which is cooked yoismedai is under the category of mavushal. Okay, so it seems like to be a machlokas Rashi and the Ran what exactly the word sholok is referring to in this context. And then the Mishnah continues and says, Omer, kainim tashil sheni tayim. Person says, I'm not going to eat cooked dish. So the din is, aser b'masa kadera rach. He's not allowed to eat any type of food in which is soft or loose, a soft dish. Rashi says, sheish ba rotev, something which has a liquid, like a porridge or grits. Umutter ba'aveh. But you are allowed to eat something which is of a thicker nature, as Rashi says, could go in daisa. That is allowed, a thicker dish. We'll see why. Umutter bebeitza tur muta uvedalas har mutza. Person's also allowed to eat an egg which was cooked many times, as it's going to be discussed in the Gemara, as well as a squash which is also very cooked. And the reason for this, as the Gemara is going to say, is because these are items in which are not eaten with bread. So only when he made this neder on a tavshil, the lashon Nedarim was something specifically for someone who's going to be eating bread. So we look in the Ran, the first wide line, Karma de'im hu rach aser. So mas kadera could go in chelka tirgis v'tisani. Karma de'im hu rach aser. He's basically saying if it's soft, if it's liquidy, then it's aser. Aval avim mutter. The hatana kol midi dikamas achla beirifta tavshakari be. This Tana holds that anything that's eaten with bread, as the Ran says, as we'll see also in the Gemara, is considered to be a tafshil. Umaskader aveh biapi navshi achli leblo pas. Something which is much more thick. It's not something which a person typically will eat with bread. So bread is something which you use like to dip sauces and soup, and as we said, like porridge, which is a very a liquidy porridge. That's something which you would eat with bread. Okay, let's go back in the Mishnah. Hanodim maskadera. If you said specifically, I'm not going to eat maskadera, so ein aser el mamase resachta. So only something in which is liquidy, but also something which is ritzech, hot. Says Rashi, damar ritzech going roitev, like some type of a gravy or soup, called the damile. Anything similar to it. Oimer kainim hayari l'kadera. Anything that goes into a pot. Sheni toyim aser b'chol hamas bashlim b'kadera. Anything, as you can understand, that goes into a pot. That's what you said, so that's going to be aser. Says the Gemara. Tanya Rabbi Yeshaya oiser. Even though our Mishnah said that if you made a neder on a tavshil, hanodim in a mavushal, that you're mutter with roasted food, or a sholok, as Rashi and the Ran explained that, Rabbi Yeshaya says no. You're also aser in eating tzli and sholok. But let's focus specifically on roasted, because roasted food is also called mavushal. How do we see that? From the psukim. The apple pisha in rayel davar zeichel davar. It's a hint. So now we're v'yavashlu as a pesach be'ish kamishpat. That you're supposed to cook the carbon pesach properly with fire. Now we know the carbon pesach has to be roasted, kim sliyesh, and yet it uses the language of v'yavashlu, bishul. So therefore, l'chara hamavushal person could also be including roasted food. Therefore, it'll be usher as well. So the Gemara says, the Rabbi Yeshaya savar halach acher lashon Torah. The Tana Dilan savar Nedarim halach acher lashon Nedarim. So our Tana holds you go after the way people speak. And people generally will talk about mavushal to exclude roasted meat. But the pasuk in which uses the language of mavushal even for roasted meat, so therefore maybe we go lashon acher Torah. So low. The kuliyam Nedarim halach acher lashon Nedarim. Really, everyone goes after lashon Nedarim. However, Marki Asrei, him and his city. But Asra the Tana Dilan, when it came to our Mishnah, with Sully Karli Tzali, Umumushal Karli Mavushal. They called these things separate. Roasted food was called roasted food. Mavushal food was mavushal food. Cooked was cooked, and roasted was roasted. They used those different languages. So therefore, it's understood if you said in that city that you're making a neder min mavushal, it's coming to exclude roasted. However, Rabbi Yeshaya, a field solely kar mavushal. He also called him mavushal. Ayvaha kran natzivla. He brought a pasuk. So why is he saying this? Gemara answers a smach to bialma, which is why also the language of the Gemara is it's zecher. It's not a rye, it's just a zecher. The zecher doesn't mean he's trying to bring a proof to his words, but rather he just shows that the psukim also mention it sometimes in this context. Okay. Fine. And the Ran brings down the Rishalmi as well. Okay. Okay, let's look at question 1 before we continue the next 2 dots. Mahi asmachta sheheber Yishayel nidoy nimsli b'chlal noidim in a mavoshol moadua in raya gemura. So when it comes to Pesach, it says v'yavashol as a Pesach, and it's in v'enuel tzli. We know it has to be roasted. However, it's not a raya gemura because nedarim halach acher lashon b'nei adam. We go after people the way that they speak. Kainim tashol chulu. So again, when it came to making a neder on a cooked food, so he said it's only loose food, as we're going to see things that are dipped with bread, and not foods in which will not be dipped with bread. I mitbashil nadar, but he made a neder about bishul. So l'chayra, it shouldn't matter if it's loose or thick food. So Rabbi Haitana kolmidi dimisachel barifta, any food that's eaten with bread, tashel karla. That he calls a tafshel. And therefore, if it's not used with bread, that's not a tafshel. Vahatanya. And we learn, as the Ran helps me out over here, but the Chu says a proof to this. Hanoder min hatavshel. If a person makes a dish, makes a neder from a cooked dish, asbechol mini tavshel. He's also with all different types of tavshel. Yasser but sleeve, a shaluk. He's also with roasted or shaluk, as again, let's just use the language of the Ran, which says it's not so cooked. Umavushal, but usher also behistriois rakos, with soft squash. Shahachaylin oichin behen pitan. And here's the key line: because sick people will even eat this squash with bread. So we see this is a proof that only soupy or liquidy foods are eaten with bread, as we see here in the Brisa. Heini, you want to tell me that this is a good food, soft squash? Rabbi Yirmiyah cholish. So Rabbi Yirmiyah was sick. So al gabeahu asya la'asuya. He went to a doctor to heal him. Chazi saw kara demachas bevese. He saw that there was a gourd by his house. So Shafki, the Nafaki he left. Omer said, Malch Moisa Islay Ladain Bevese. I don't want to even come. I did this house visit, but I see you have death in your house. Right? I see that you were in the middle of eating this gourd, and that's obviously what's killing you. V'ana Eo Lasaya Yase, and you're asking me to come and heal you. It's like you go to a person doing a home visit, and then you open up their fridge and it's filled with all this unhealthy food, and you see that they're busy, engaged in doing all these horrible things to themselves. Like, how do you expect me to help you? You're obviously not helping yourself. Anyway, we see clearly that gourds are not good for you. Lo kasha. So the Gemara gives three answers. Ha birakiche, ha bashune. If they're soft, then they're good for you. If they're hard squash, it's not good. Rabbi bar ula oimer ha bakar gufe v'ha begave dekara. One is the inside of the squash, which is good. Then the outer part, which is hard, is not good for you. Rabbi Yehuda luliva dekara. The inside of the squash, basilka, and the leek, or luliva, dekisna bekutcha. And all these different things together with kutach, this dip. He said, but all these things are usher to say in front of an amaretz. What does that mean? So the Ran says, Kadesh lo yakru hapishtin lakach. So they don't end up ripping out your flax for this purpose. In other words, even though it's true that everything inside of it is good to eat with kutach, the problem is if you start publicizing that this is really good food, so people are going to end up basically taking it. So therefore, you don't want to do that. So that's the second answer. It depends. The inside is good, the outside's bad, or it depends if it's soft or hard. Third answer, Rabbi Eimer man choylin rabbanon. When it's referring to people who are sick, it's referring to the rabbanon. What does that mean? So Rashi says, she'oiskim b'Torah, they are involved in learning. They don't get enough in this world, and therefore they can sometimes get sick. Skip to the bottom ran. Rabbanon diafil bibriyasan, even when they're healthy, hein teshushe koyach, they're weak. The nesha Torah mateshes koycham, because the Torah weakens their body. Obviously, you also have to. A person who learns Torah, the idea is you're learning so much, you sometimes forget the importance of your physical health. So obviously, you're supposed to do both. But leaving it to someone who only focuses on learning Torah, that individual is going to have weakness. Rabbi l'taimei Yomi Rabbi, as he says, as we continue to Mem Testament Beis, he says, Kaman matzalinan al katsiri val marie. Who is it that we daven for all these different things? The Ran says, B'chol yemos hashana, for all year round, for the harvesting. And Rashi says, Roifi chol yemo Yisrael. A katsire is you're asking for health. Marie is al pleta soifrehen. So basically, who's davening? Come on, Rav Yosi. It's like the shita of Rav Yosi. Why? As the Ran says, Adan nidam b'chol yoim. Rav Yosi holds that a person's judged every day. Dil Rabbanan di islahu de nidam Rosh Hashanah. You're judged on Rosh Hashanah. Kivan shenigmer dinan ein tefillah mo'elos lahen. Since you already have a Gemara din, your tefillah actually doesn't help, which is an unbelievable pshat. So we daven like the shita of Rav Yosi. That's why we say all these things. Midi Omer katsiri umarie shemamina katsiri mamish marie rabbanon. Who are the marie? This is referring to the weak people, or referring to the rabbanon. It says the Ran katsiri mamish choylin. That you're praying for the sick. Umikri katsiri, why they call that? Lefi shenifsham katsara machmas chaloyim. That because of their sickness, they're cut off, and they're like basically sick. And so the point is, who are we davening for? You're davening like the shita of Rav Yosi. Okay, and we have over here. TA, okay, here we go, TA 24. TA 24 says, Kaman matzlina na kitzri v'amari k'Rav Yosi, the adam nidam chol yom, mazeh kitzir Marie. What is this referring to? Mem Testament Beis. So basically it says, this is TA 24, Katsiri are choylim, people are sick. Marie are the rabbanon. Those are the rabbis. Okay. Weiter. And then it says, umutter b'aveh. So if you made this neder on tavshil, So you're aser b'maskadera rach umuter b'ava. But if it's thick, it's okay because a person doesn't eat bread with thick foods. Mastisim delo kibavloi. This is not like what the Babylonians do, that our Mishnah allows thick foods because it only eats with bread. These foolish Babylonians, they eat bread with bread. Doesn't necessarily mean they're eating bread with dipping bread into bread, like make a bread sandwich, but it basically means that they eat bread even with things which are thicker. Okay, what does it make you a bavloi tipshoy? But that's how often the language is used. Okay, Rav Chisda. So actually, let's quickly look at question 2. Bavloi tipshoy, my nafkamin ladina. So what's the difference? So the answer is, if you make a neder from a tashel and bubble, it's also b'masakader of it. Even thick food. Since they eat even thicker foods with bread, tashel mikri. It's still considered to be a dish. Okay. Rav Chisda. So on this, Rav Chisda says, Hamashil lohoin lohalein nakdane dehutzel. So when it came to, as the Ran says, these people who are nikrane she'oichlin b'nikiyos, these are people that eat with cleanliness, shemedaktakin b'achilasan, that very particular with how they eat. Hadain daisa, when it comes to this daisa, which the Ran says is a meichel shalchitim uvushalom, it's food which is like cooked wheat, like a thicker porridge. Heichen mali lemechla. So it explains how is it good for them to eat. So dechite balachma, dechite the saare balachma. When it comes to with wheat, when it's made with wheat, they would eat it with bread. Also with wheat and barley balachma, they would eat it with bread. However, the saare, if it was something which was only a barley, balachma the saare, they would eat it rather with barley bread. Odilma bechite b'desari, udevasari b'dechite. Maybe when it comes to their wheat, they'll eat also with barley bread. So the question is, when they have wheat and barley, is it lachma de saare? Do they eat bread which is barley, or do they use saare b'dechite? So let's just see if Rashi says any more. Dechite yachol lachla belechem shalchitim. They could eat it with wheat bread. V'daisa de sari yachol lachla belechem shel sarim. And the daisa, which is made of barley, they eat with bread of barley. Or maybe daisa shalchitim. When it comes to this wheat, it's made out of wheat, this daisa, yachol lachla b'shel sarim. Maybe it's good to be eaten with barley bread. B'shel sarim b'shel chitim. In other words, do you eat the same bread which corresponds to the daisa, or do you use a different grain? So Rabbi Achle, that's the question. Rabbi Achle bechasise. So Rabbi used to eat it with roasted grain. Says the Ran, kemach shel kloyos. Rabba barabhuna ashche rabhuna de ka'achel daisa be'etzbate. That, so it doesn't really explain, but this is what he would do. He would eat it this particular manner. And when it comes to further table manners, for some reason, daisa was something which he would eat with his fingers. Why are you using your fingers, your hands? Doesn't make more sense. You should be using a spoon or a fork. If you eat daisa with your fingers, basim, it tastes, it's even more tasty. The kol dechein betrain, and certainly if you use 2 fingers, the kol dechein betlas, and certainly if you use 3. Again, what constitutes as manners for us, maybe it was different then. And again, this is a special type of food. We know nowadays there's certain etiquette of what we can use our fingers for, or what we're supposed to use a fork for. So Amali Rav L'chia B'rei. So Rav Chia said to his son, V'chein Omer Le Rav Huna La Rabba B'rei. Mizamnin loch lamechel daisa. He invited you to eat daisa ad parsa, until a parsa. Says the Ran, leich parsa, you should go up until a parsa k'dei le'echel daisa. If someone invites you, you should go that far just to eat that. L'meichel bisra de Torah, if someone invites you to eat meat, ad tlosen parson. It's even more substantial, and therefore you should even go a further distance to get to that food. Armulei rab l'chi b'rei, v'chein armulei rab huna l'rab b'rei, kol midam, when any food that you eat, l'tifloit kamei raboch. Do not spit out in front of your teacher, which obviously shows a lack of respect, or the way the Rashi says it is lo tarok rok bifnei rabcha. Do not spit in front of your Rebbe, as the Gemara in Eruvin Rashi quotes that someone who does so is going to be chayav misa. So, and he says, for the Rashi says, dalas v'daisa. If let's say a person is eating certain types of dishes, this daisa or gourd, when is dabin l'cha haroik b'ficha, and you have spit in your mouth, pulled bifnei rabcha. If you spit it out in front of your Rebbe, uzark oisel chutz, throw it outward. Sheyesh lo sakanas nafashos. For these things are dangerous. Shehin kash leguva shel adam kipsil shel avor. It's like lead. So there's certain foods that you have to spit out, and therefore it would be self-understood. Your Rebbe would understand that it's something which is acceptable for you to do. That's why it says, don't spit out any of these foods. Lobar min karab daisa. Shehin daimin lebesilta shel avar. It's like a wick of lead. They feel kamei shavar malkapolit. You'll have to spit it out, and even in front of someone like that. And Rashi says you should not be embarrassed for doing so. Okay. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, chad ochel daisa be'etzbatei. So one of them ate this daisa with their fingers. V'chad ochel behutza. And the other one ate it with a piece of wood. Amule de ka'achal behutza, the one who ate it with wood, with the achal be'etzbatei, ad matai ata machilchalani soatecha. He said, how long are you going to be eating literally your waist? In other words, they have germs on your fingers. So the dirt mixes in from your nails of your fingers onto the food. And therefore, it's better not to touch food with your hands. Or Malay, the achal be'etzbate, the one who was eating with his fingers, said, with the achal behutza, the one who was eating with a fork, let's say, on mas'ata machileni rukcha. You're eating your own saliva. And the Ran says, Shein derech l'kanech hahutzel acher shenasel l'toich piv. You wouldn't wipe off the fork every time when you put it back into the plate, and therefore the fact that you're using your fork that you've already had saliva on it, he considers that not to be okay. Again, obviously, each person according to their generation and what's considered to be socially proper behaviors. Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Shimon Aisu L'Kamaihu, it was brought in front of them bulus fayin, some type of a fig, which was food which is hard to digest. Rashi says Te'enim was a fig which is bashul yoisimedai, because it was exceedingly like over ripened. So because of that, it was something which is hard, as the Ran says, shekoshnlis achel. It's hard to digest. So Rabbi Yehuda achel, so Rabbi Yehuda ate it. Rav Shimon lo achel. So Rabbi Yehuda, my time will achel mar, when you eat it. So Amalei, Rav Shimon, elu ein yoitzim imnei moyim kol ikar. These things are so hard to digest, they hardly ever come out of your stomach. Because of that, it's not healthy for me to eat them. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda koshkin shenismach aleihin l'machar. You should rely on them tomorrow. Says the Ran, shemitay she'in misachlin, since they are hard to digest, misachvin b'meim, they stay in your stomach. The whole zman sha'imdim sham zonin esaguf, and they continue to satiate your body. So maybe they're a good thing. Rabbi Yehuda Havi Yosef Kamed Rav Tarfon, Armulei Rav Tarfon Hayoim Panechat Sehuvim. He said, today I see that your face is shining. You look very happy. So Armulei Emesh, yesterday Yatsu Avadecha L'Sada, your servants went out to the field. Ve'haviu lanu teradin, and they brought to you beets. V'achalnum b'lo melach, and they were eaten without salt. V'imach achalnum b'melach, and I would have eaten these beets with salt. Koshkin shoyapenenu sehuvim, then even more so, my face would have been even more glowing. So apparently these beets or something which are very good. So Amra hi matronisa, Rabbi Yehuda. So matronisa said to Rabbi Yehuda, Moira v'Ravi, you appear to be in a drunken status. So this was actually Lamach Rabbi Yehuda Havi Yosef committed Rav Tarfon. So Rav Tarfon said this to Rabbi Yehuda. So when he spoke Rav Tarfon, he told him it was because of the beats. Rabbi Yehuda was also presented by this matronisa, this woman. He said, you appear drunk. Your face is so glowy. Or Malay hemnusa biyada dahi isasa. So he said, as Rashi says, emunasi biyadech, you should have, I believe, in your hand, she'enu sheisekol shaniyayin el kiddusha Abdullah. First, you should know, I look drunk. Okay, you should first of all know that I do not drink. That's just a reality of myself. I only drink wine then. The arba kasi de pischa, and I also drink the 4 cups of wine on Pesach. These are all things that I'm required to do, but that's it. The chog rani sidoinai, and I have to wrap up my head mina Pesach ad hatzeres, all the way for like these 7 weeks. In other words, I'm not someone that is able to drink, and I certainly don't enjoy it. It causes me massive headaches. It's not good for me. Ella chachmas adam tar panav. The wisdom of a person lightens up the face. So that's what he said to the matronisa. He says it's because of chachma. When you learn, it lightens up your face. Amrule hahut tzedoiki Rabbi Yehuda. So a tzeduki said to Rabbi Yehuda the same thing. Panecha daimin ikimalavi ribis ikimagadli chazerin. You look like someone you charge interest, or you're raising pigs, which is like a passive income. You're making money even though you're not really doing anything. So armalei bihudoi tervayu asiran. You should know that both of these are aser. You're not allowed to do these things. El esr ba'arba besa kisi isle min besa abe midrasha. You should know there's 24 bathrooms that are in my way from my house to the base medrash. The whole shavashah ni nichnas the whole echad ve'echad, and every hour I enter into each one. In other words, I'm very fortunate that I have bathrooms nearby. Rabbi Yehuda kad ozl b'midrasha, when he went to the base medrash, shakul gulfa ad kaftei, he took a jug on his shoulders. Says Rashi, he took this jug to sit on it. Great is work because it honors those who work. Says Rashi, and now I can sit on it in the base medrash, which basically it says Rashi, says the Ran, gabi karka. He's saying I'm able, because I do work, I'm able to enjoy the work that I do afterwards, because I'm able to, the fact that I brought this, now I have somewhere to sit. Now Shimon shakled sana al kasve, he brought this something on his shoulders. The base of Rabbi Yehuda nafkis naktat amra, that Rabbi Yehuda, the house of Rabbi Yehuda, they went out with this wool. Av de glima de hutve kad nafkas l'shuka mechasibe. So they had this wool, and they were able to cover themselves out. Says Rashi, Ihi l'shuka, she went to the marketplace, and mechasibe, and she covered herself. The kad nafik Rabbi Yehuda l'sui havi mechasi matzli. Rabbi Yehuda went out to daven, he was able to be covered up as well, and davened. So he was happy that he was able to have this garment. So we see over here that Rabbi Yehuda's wife and Rabbi Yehuda, they actually used to share this garment together. He made a fast. Rabbi Yehuda also lebei tanisa, and Rabbi Yehuda didn't go to the lebei tanisa. Amrin lay. They said, Lo isle kisuye. There's nothing to cover him. There's nothing for him to cover himself with. So shader beglima v'lo kabil. He handed over this cloak, but v'lo kibil. He didn't accept it. As we continue to know with Aleph, dali sifta. Instead, he lifted up a mat that he was sitting on it. Yarmalei l'shluch, and he said to a messenger, Chazi ma'ika, see what this is. Mihu onichali dishani bahadi alma. However, I do not want to derive benefit from this world. Says Rashi, Re'ei kama oisher yeshli. You should see how much wealth there is. Shenasalo nes. A great thing happened to me, a miracle. Mismali ko oiso makam zuhuvim, and Chazimai Ika. Nonetheless, he says he didn't want to use any of these things. If you look, Dali Sifta Machsel, so when he lifted it up, so Masanisim Havi Nokit. Basically, it was a massive wealth was found underneath him. But he said, I don't want to be Samech on this nace. I don't want to use any Sechar in this world, and therefore I'm not going to take it. Okay. All right, let's look at one more question. Question TB25. Hanoidermin hamavushal mahu b'tzli hamaskanas habavli. Habavli, it says. So the Mishnah, this is what I wrote. The Mishnah cited a machlokas between, because of a pasuk by Karban Pesach, but the pasuk is only a smach tabi alma, and we say by Nedarim we are hoylach acholash adam to say tzli is exact. I'm not exactly sure if that's what the answer is. They say like this: "B'dam halachach shemani adam, u'makam shekarin tzli mavushal motor, makam shekarin aflet tzli mavushal aser." It's all totally on the place where you are. Adkan.